the shoreline. It's really moving, and you do really find yourself thinking of 9/11.
And doesn't that make it that much more incredible that this disaster was almost forgotten and that there wasn't even a plaque remembering it until the late 1980s?
That was the question I kept going back to. It haunted me. How could something like this be lost in the currents of time? And I developed many theories, but still today it remains surreal in my mind.
Do you think the main reason is that these were just working class people?
I do. I think that on numerous levels. I mean, there were no celebrated figures on this ship. There were no Astors or unsinkable Molly Browns like the Titanic, which happened only 3 years earlier. But also another level was these were salt-of-the-earth, immigrant, stoic, tough factory workers. And I really believe even this, they just repressed and stuffed down and said, we don't talk about that now. We're going to move on. We're going to move on with our lives.
Ironically, the Titanic may have had something to do with why this disaster happened.
Yeah, that's the great irony, because scholars believe that at the time of this capsizing, the Eastland rolled over partially, maybe mainly, because it was top-heavy. Why was it top-heavy? Because it had too many lifeboats on the top decks because of the Titanic.
This was a huge boat, especially in terms of the size of the Chicago River. So people just couldn't believe this happened. Was the shock of the passengers and also maybe the people who might have helped them part of why so many people died?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Today you look out at this small square of river and your mind boggles that this 300-foot steel ship with 5 decks was actually moored there, and it actually rolled over. But for many of the people on the boat, it was hopeless. They were either crushed or drowned or suffocated below decks because this boat was packed.
There were some great stories of heroism that day and also of cowardice.
That's right. It's almost as though this event was a baptism of fire, where you saw human behavior on each extreme. I mean, there was an 18-year-old kid who literally fought his way through the police cordons, punched a cop in the face to get through, and dove in and saved 35 victims. And on the other hand, people like the captain of the ship essentially lost their minds. The captain of the ship lurched back onto the boat after it had capsized and tried to drag away the rescuers and the welders who were cutting holes in his beloved boat to save people that were pounding, and the muffled screams inside were heard by all, and he tried to pull away the welders. You can't cut holes in my ship.
Also incredible, this boat wasn't scuttled.
Yeah, to add the ultimate insult, in my opinion, and the ultimate irony, the boat was just basically carted away a few weeks later and taken to the auction block, and auctioned off, and it ended up in the possession of the Navy, and they put a new coat of paint on it and repaired some of the floors and put some cabins in and some guns.
Historically, did it make any difference? Did it improve matters?
That's an excellent question, and I wish I could say, yes, it changed everything, but unfortunately, I don't think it changed much at all. No major legislation was an outgrowth of this. There were the criminal proceedings dragged on for literally 2 decades, and there was only one person who was convicted of negligence, and I believe that guy was a fall guy. He was actually a hero. His name was Joe Erickson. He was the chief engineer. He risked his life to shut down a boiler and save lives, but eventually he was the only one that was convicted, and by the time he was finally convicted, he had already passed away.
Many places in this area are haunted as a result.
You do hear folklore around Chicago, and I have for years, that there are places that are haunted by the memory of the Eastland and literally haunted by spirits of the Eastland. The temporary morgues, the building outside which we're standing right now was the